Now I'd like to say something about what's called the radio sky. Take a look at this image. The above, the upper part of this picture represents a panoramic view of the entire sky, 360 degrees, as if our eyes were sensitive to radio waves rather than to light. And the lower part of the diagram is the same 360 degrees of sky as it appears visually to us. If we could walk out at night and see at radio frequencies, such a sight would go a long way toward persuading astrologers as to the existence of preferential directions in space. In other words, some areas of the sky have more things happening in them than do others. You can just see that from this diagram. While bright, discrete radio sources, just like our visual stars, they do stand out as points. But when you look at this radio map, the overpowering sense that is received from such a viewing is the overall shape, the body of the Milky Way galaxy. At radio frequencies, there's no mistaking the entire galactic plane. Much less totally obvious is the very heart and center of the galaxy, because it just abounds with light. Even at visual frequencies, we can renew our sense of cosmic direction almost any night of the year by just walking outside and looking. Now, there's a reason that we can't see at visual frequencies the great mass of light that's concentrated at the galaxy center. And the reason is very simple. At visual wavelengths, great clouds of relatively near dust, relatively near to us, intervene. These clouds of dust block our view of the galactic center and also of much of the galactic plane. In general, these dark clouds prevent us from seeing more than a few kiloparsecs in any direction along the galactic plane. If we could see our own galaxy from the vantage point of a neighboring galaxy, such as Andromeda, that center would appear just filled with light. Now, radio and infrared waves, the lower spectrums, they are able to bend around the particles of dust and reach us. But it's only been in recent years has it been possible to really see through radio astronomy, to really see the actual center in the overall structure of our own galaxy. And that's been done through these non-visual windows in the electromagnetic spectrum. The radio map of the heavens that I've been showing you on these pages makes it very clear. It brings out the basic shape, the body, and even what we could call the aura of our galaxy. Our dependence upon the physical eye, in optical frequencies in general, results in an idea of the heavens as filled with an infinite number of points of light, stars. But otherwise, it's relatively empty of shape and form. It's similar to the human form, like if we were only able to see the eyes of a person but not their shape. So when we looked at a crowd, we'd just see a bunch of points of light of these eyes looking back at us. The fixed stars are like that. They're set in space staring at us. But most of us do not have very much sense or very much of a feel for the fabric or the matrix, the body in which these fixed stars that we see are set. But this shape becomes very clear in radio maps. And it's obvious that the great galaxy, in fact, is the mother, the matrix. And it's the home for countless stars that are embedded within it. And these radio maps reveal that whole areas of the sky are filled with more light than others, and that this light is graded with a concentration toward the galactic plane, and of course there is the brilliant galactic nucleus or center. Until about 40 or 50 years ago, our knowledge of the cosmos outside the sphere of the Earth came almost entirely from the light that we could collect with large mirrors and lenses via telescopes. In fact, light meant to us the eye and only the visual part of the electromagnetic spectrum. The atmosphere surrounding the Earth is largely opaque, and it blocks to most. It blocks parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, and so that we can't see through it. Although there are several transparent regions through which we may receive light, and it's through those that we can look out from here into deep space. And these have been termed windows. And the two most important windows that we can see are, of course, the optical and the radio bands of the light spectrum. If we compare these two windows to the sound spectrum, the radio window represents a 10-octave span. Think about this. While the optical, the visual window, represents a little less than a single octave. And there are several other bands of relative transparency in the infrared range through which appear an almost entirely different set of stars. Think about that. And constellations in the infrared. In fact, the range of energy between the extremes of the electromagnetic spectrum is so great that very different techniques had to be evolved just for their study, just to see them. Now let's talk for a minute about the Earth's aura. The atmosphere of our Earth serves to shield the Earth from much of the radiation reaching it from outer space, and with the exception, as mentioned, of two windows in the visual and radio frequencies. In recent years, research has removed the entire concept of these windows, bypassing our atmosphere. And it's done this through means of balloons and rockets and other space vehicles. Beyond our immediate atmosphere, the entire range of the light spectrum is wide open. It can be received, beyond our atmosphere. In our lifetimes, we've experienced not only a fantastic increase in the receptivity, the ability to receive light, but we've also made active outreach beyond the atmosphere of the Earth itself. We have kind of stepped away from ourselves into the space beyond and into ideas outside our imagination. Only a few short years ago, we wouldn't have had them. Now, how are these different kinds of light generated? And the answer to this question is the key to understanding how modern astrologers can interpret astrophysics. So we should be interested in the kinds of celestial light. As mentioned earlier, a key concept here is to understand that there is light beneath, slower than visual light, and also light above, faster than our eyes can see. Remember that our eyes can see like less than an octave relative to sound. Light beneath the visual spectrum, slower light, is that of radio waves and infrared objects. Radio waves, the longest waves, they are generated by oscillating electric currents. Shortwave radio waves or microwaves have a wavelength similar to that of sound through air. Infrared radiation, which is like a hot stove, for instance, is produced by rearrangements of the outer electrons in atoms. As mentioned earlier, the human eye is sensitive to a very narrow range of wavelengths. And as I said, it's corresponding in musical terminology to less than a single octave. And this is to be compared to the enormous frequency wave to which the human ear is sensitive. On the other higher side of the visual, there is light that's faster or higher than we can see. Ultraviolet light immediately joins the visual spectrum at the high end. X-rays, even higher yet, have wavelengths of the approximate size of atoms, and they originate in the rearrangement of the innermost electrons in atoms. And even higher, the gamma rays are the electromagnetic waves of highest frequency, and therefore the very shortest wavelength. And they originate in the rearrangement of the particles within the atomic nucleus itself. So how does our universe appear at these different frequencies? So we're talking about the types of light. Starting with the longer radio waves of several meters, the reading or the picture that we get is of a universe alive with radiant haze or a constant glow of radiation in all directions. As we move to receivers of higher radio frequencies, certain general forms begin to emerge out of the overall fog. The haze appears to be brighter or thicker in the direction of the galactic plane, and particularly around the galactic nucleus, which is alive with radio light. The plane of our entire galaxy is like a glowing arch that reaches across the heavens. As we further increase in frequency, we penetrate or see more sharply through the radiant fog. We begin to see real discrete features. They begin to appear. So extended sources of radiation, and we're talking about still higher frequencies, we get point sources, what are called radio stars. They begin to show up, and they're shining at these frequencies more brightly than any other objects in the heaven, in that they have never been seen with the human eye. And at still higher frequencies yet, we reach, our visual level of radiation, where point sources are the main objects, the stars. Moving higher, at even higher frequencies beyond the visual spectrum, are X-ray and higher yet gamma ray wavelengths, where the energy is so intense that it looks or passes right through most materials. Until recently, our knowledge of the physical universe is a result largely of what we've been able to see in the visible or conscious mind window. Thanks to the astrophysical discoveries of the 20th century, we have augmented our visual information both below the visual, as radio frequencies, and above it, X-ray frequencies. So the rational or conscious mind, what we could call our visual eye, it is no longer required by itself to exclusively carry the burden of leadership in our life as it has in the past centuries. So in other words, our dependence upon the organ of sight, the eye, and its ideas is to some extent breaking down, and the load that it once carried is being redistributed among other senses, those in addition to the eye. In other words, it's been enhanced. The conscious mind, the visual spectrum, has a long history of discrimination and a particular way of looking at the world, of course. And in summary, we are now discovering that we can see, quote unquote, see, through other senses as well, and that the future looks brighter as we learn to tolerate and use these new ways of seeing. The results of all of these different portions of the light spectrum, they add up, or they form a unified whole, of course. Although we should expect to find astrological specialists working in areas outside of the visual spectrum of the eye, or what we call the rational mind. And radio frequencies, the universe at radio frequencies, remember that it has textures and forms never seen with the eye, and it's literally a map of our subconscious, of our psychic realms. We can expect to find in the future radio astrologers measuring and discovering individuals who personify or who represent some of the great radio sources. In other words, by noting and monitoring the astrological positions of great radio and infrared sources, we should be able to better pinpoint and better track individuals who personify these sources, have them in their charts. We might call them psychics or psychic healers. So we can now begin to chart the psychic potential in ourselves. And keep in mind that the entire region around late tropical Sagittarius and early to middle Capricorn is literally filled with radiant energy. This is the area that surrounds the very heart center of the galaxy, the galactic nucleus itself. If that area of your natal chart is very active, this in itself is a very strong indicator. And at yet higher frequencies, we begin to reach the visual level of radiation, where we have bright point sources, what we call the fixed stars. Those are the main objects that are resolved in the visual spectrum. Beyond the visual window, what we can see are the ultra-high frequencies of X-ray and gamma ray wavelengths. And these waves shine right through much of what we would call matter and indicate the sites of cataclysmic events and really massive outpourings of energy beyond any comprehension that we could have. I mean, as mentioned, on the other side of the visible spectrum, the higher frequency of these X-rays and gamma rays sources, there we find a measurement of what we could only call superconscious, the superconscious, where we don't find so much these broad strokes and texture as we did in radio, in the radio spectrum, but instead we find really powerful point sources that clearly see right through that form and structure that, that's so visible to us at radio frequencies. So we can expect to see X-ray astrologers also appear, whose chief interest is not form, but light as never before measured. We should be able to chart and measure X-ray sources in our natal charts and determine those who have the gift of clairvoyance or clear seeing, seeing right through to the heart of the matter. And above all, these new techniques will mean a discovery and an appreciation of a variety of types of genius. And this is important. Besides the familiar fixed stars that have captivated our attention for so long, just think of them as movie stars, there's room for the rest of us. We will be able to find and know radio and X-ray light and genius right alongside the familiar visual stars that astrology monitors. Perhaps we'll learn to go to those among us who can feel at radio frequencies, the psychics and sensors, and we'll learn better how to feel ourselves, and we'll explore the feeling and texture of our life. And when we have trouble appreciating or feeling in our own lives, we can learn to do this through those with very strong radio sources in their chart. Perhaps they could help us to be in touch with ourselves once again. And on the other hand, we'll go to the X-ray genius when we hurt or when we feel too much, and we could benefit from their vision that sees through our feelings and helps to clear it up. Persons with prominent X-ray stars or black holes in their natal chart perhaps will have the gift to cut through our own fog and resolve our problems, just clearing them up, instant cauterization. And we'll seek them out when we're lost in our confusions. So again, the vision that occurs to me is one of a new appreciation and tolerance for all of the different kinds of light and their human representatives. The psychic or radio genius can accurately see or feel and tell us truths about ourselves that we personally may have never known, how to feel for ourselves. And the X-ray or reflective genius cuts through our feelings and mirrors ourself to us, which may help us accept the self just as it is. Now, an initial fear that I had when I first considered all of the very many new radio and X-ray points was that I would not be able to make sense of so many points and would somehow spread myself too thin. In fact, this never happened. The opposite was true. Understanding how all objects can be grouped brought me relief and made dealing with all of these objects much more manageable. My own investigations of this material show that each of us will be drawn naturally to study those kinds of points that we in fact are and that we act out in life. I was drawn inexorably to just those points that figure most clearly in my horoscope, and I discovered it in these remote cosmic events, some of my innermost feeling and self. I greatly had feared being lost out there in the stars, and my faith in life has increased very much as I experience a great return from my inquiry, something coming back, and a coming to know my own self. I have no longer any sense of there being any, quote, other, end quote, out there. But no, just me, myself, and my life out there as it is in here. So there's no other one. There's just the one that we already know.